Hello, it's Holly here. I just wanted to come on and have a little chat because someone messaged me on Facebook a few days ago asking about um, self care as a carer. And I think it's a really, really important topic. And I think it's one that gets put by the wayside a little bit because people are busy looking after the people that they love. And they don't even think about it half the time, and then they get very tired. So I just wanted to come in and discuss some nuance around it and then maybe some tools to help. So the question is, how do we love but not carry it all? And I think it's a really, really important question because while we have to support people, we're also trying to help them become independent. We're also trying to help them, to a greater or a lesser extent, depending on what they can manage, help them to um, be the keep growing and developing and learning how to be in this world on their own. And some people can't do that a lot, and some people can do that a whole lot more than they know how, and we keep progressing. So the question from this mum was, I love my son by allowing him to talk uninterrupted. I heard this week that he might be releasing to allow some space inside for cognitive function, as in doing a lot of uninterrupted speaking and being quite, loud. What I would like to know now is, how can I get my nervous system to receive calm during and after? I feel I'm in need of a big silence because of the anxiety, or at least his energy crashing into me. I sound selfish. Sorry, my face is in front of that, so it's hard to read those words. But I find myself going into depression. How do we love but not carry it all? And then I asked her to qualify that a little bit more so that I knew what she actually needed from me. Um, and so she added, for 10 years, our family recognized the records that my son would play, repeated feelings, scenarios, thoughts, pressures, solutions. We called them records to remind each other he needed to get to the end, and he wasn't asking for a solution. He needed to vent. These are usually 10 minutes in warm up. Play the record, move forward. If they come in little bursts, it can come to stimming, head hitting, tears. An organized um, run, sorry about that again, seems to be more effective for release. And she had watched a podcast, or listened to a podcast, which I think was talking about Gestalt um, feelings and understanding, so that it's hard for people, especially when they don't have good interoceptive capacity, to know what they're feeling and thinking. And so the feeling and thinking kind of come second. People kind of let it all out, and then they can capture it or know it, or at least have expressed it, so they have some connection to it rather than it just being bottled up inside. And it may very well be a way of moving out of an immobilized state as well, to be able to articulate and mobilize a bit. uh, and so it's very useful, and it's very useful if the family can hold and support that, so the person is able to be in touch with themselves, be in touch with what's happening for them, and to process. Because from where I sit, one of the things I think about these kind of issues is the body is always in a very hypertonic state, which means people don't go into a deep dorsal rest, which means they don't sleep, which means they don't neural prune. And so there's a way in which there's just always so much going on in the brain. And then, sleep's supposed to allow us to subside and collate and empty, um, and store. And instead, it's sort of all always there. And so when things get too much, it does flood out, it does rush out. And it's a way of recording, as this lady's suggesting, it's recording what's going on. So there's some sort of connection to self. And then, very much from a psychological perspective, that connection to self requires somebody else very often, because you need them to witness it for you, because your capacity to do all of that on your own is limited. And it is. It's I think a function of being in a hypertonic state, as I said. And so that executive functioning and the ability to sort and sift and hold things and know where they are and be able to go and find them um, is not accessible. Not broken, but not accessible. So all of that's a lot. It's a lot to live in as a body. It's a lot to live in as someone who wants to, because let's not pretend all these people that I'm talking about here aren't highly intelligent and highly fantastic, but they are stuck in a system that doesn't allow them to access themselves properly. And so a lot of the time you have to proxy to other people. So the mum very often, or the dad as well. It's not, it's people take these roles as they will and how. Proxy and become the sound, not just the sounding board, but almost like the reflector, so that you hold them well when you're in that role, and they they can know who they are through you, and it's very important. But what I also want to say, it's very important to remember that there's two bodies there and there's two nervous systems. And it's very hard being a human being just on your own and getting things right. It's very hard being a parent and getting things right. It's people who are supporting people with this level of challenge work very hard day and night. And so their nervous system gets exhausted too. Everybody's important. And so, how do we look after people? How do we look after ourselves? How do we um, be the best mother, be the best version of ourselves? If we're a carer, we get paid to do this work and then we go home. If we're a parent, it is continual. And so there's a need, which is why I love this question and why I'm spending some time on it. There's a need to appreciate the truth of it, which is everyone has a nervous system and everyone needs looking after. And then it's a how, because when you're supporting someone consistently, you're very open to them, especially if you're the mum. Psychically, you're very open. Anyone's watched the telepathy tapes recently, love Diane Powell. There's this huge connection between the mum and the kid. It's in particular because of the mother. I haven't looked at them enough to see if they've got any dad stuff going on. But you're psychically very porous, which means you don't have a lot of barrier when there's a big force coming at you. And as people get older and bigger, there's a big force coming at you. And there's greater and greater levels of frustration, greater and greater levels of, I want to be this person, I'm this smart, I can't get it out, I can't communicate. And so there's a barrage of energetics that will come towards the mum in this case. How do you deal with that constantly? How do you manage? How do you not get your system to go immobilized and depressed if it's consistent? Because depression, to me, very often is just an exhausted system. It's exhausted, and it's just the vagal system's only got so much give in it before it collapses under pressure. And that's why I'm not really big on vagal pinging things, because it's like we need to take care of it as a plant or something sentient and alive, and it gets tired. So we need to recognize the need for support, and I wish our culture supported better. Even in Australia, we are doing it less well than we did before now with changes to the government. It's quite sad. Culturally, we don't seem to know how to raise as a village, which I think there's a podcast coming out soon called Unseen that looks really nice. But single-handedly trying to be this person with the level of perfection we require from our parents, our mothers, is exhausting. And so I'm just going to go back to that other slide. Oh, no, I can't. Where we where we want to be of service, where we want to do help, we also have to recognize our line. And so there, one, recognize your line, recognize that you have needs. And then how do you meet them? I don't know, in a way, because every family's different. What you can have is different. People have different resources, whether it's people, money, extra family, whatever. And so within that context, what can you have? Within that context, what do you need? Obviously, respite's great, where you get to have a weekend off, whether that person that you're supporting goes and lives somewhere else for a few days, or whether you do, so that your nervous system gets a break, is vital, I think. And, people do that where they can. But then also, I think there's other aspects to this where you can, uh, you know, psychically buffer yourself. One way of being able to do that is to acknowledge that you are separate people. So what's happening for that person, you can kind of learn to close off a bit from it and see it's not about you. It's they're running through something. So you're sort of allowed to shut down to it, be present to it, but you don't have to run it through your energy system like you're a vacuum cleaner. You can actually witness it with some barrier up, and I mean energetic barrier. So that's an interesting thing to learn how to do and understand. And within that, and it's complex and it isn't, but within that is getting a vagal system of your own that's well toned, so that you have some buffer and some choice. And there I would bring my exercises in. There I would bring, they're gentle enough, they're quiet enough to allow the body to have some support and reconnect without pinging it back into, just jabbing yourself with an electric, whatever they're called. Zap that vagus nerve back into attention when it's exhausted. You can hear from this person that she's tired. And so resting is great. Taking some time out, having a bath, finding ways, whether it's meditation or my exercises or a walk or sitting under a tree, something that allows you to take a break. But prior to that, you have to actually be able for yourself, I think, to acknowledge that you're separate and that you need a break, so that um, you're reflecting to yourself and you're reflecting to them that you're separate people, and you make some space between you. And there's a lovely line in the runes book of let the winds of heaven dance between you. I think it's really hard to do when you are supporting someone who is so needy, but at the same time, there has to be some definition and some separation, because there is, you're not the same person. And like Anat Banyel will say, just the raise of an eyebrow is enough to change parameters and change people's thinking. There's something about being able to make a separation between you. And that's the winds of heaven dancing between you. It's not saying it out loud. It's not going, I'm going to do this now. It's a sensibility of self that you can do more easily when you have a more robust vagal system, that you can do when you can do some top-down stuff when you're not abjectly exhausted. There's different measures depending on where you're at. But if you can signify both to yourself and to the other person and almost make a channel between you that is no go land, no man's land, then it can very subtly shift the game. And it doesn't mean the other person's not supported properly. It doesn't mean you're going to drop the ball and not care for them. But it does imply at a very subtle psychic level that that you see them and you see yourself. It's very hard when people have lived with you for a long time. They're supposed to emancipate You're supposed to emancipate from your mum. You're supposed to individuate. It's very hard to do that if you are highly, highly dependent. It makes people very cross because you don't want to be stuck like this to people. You want to be able to be independent. And so it's almost quite a respectful thing to do to be able to delineate yourself from them because you're actually giving them a bit of uh, it's a consideration or a trust that they're a separate individual and they're fine. Even if they're not fine and all sorts of things are going on, if you can sit back when that stuff's going on, and even when it isn't, but in particular, if when it is, you can sit back, not energetically engage, which you may have to unlearn and relearn something else because you've been doing it for 25 years, 17 years, or 10 years. But you can sit, be present to this that's happening, witness it with great regard and not engage at an emotional level. That actually allows that person to hold it a bit more. It also means you're not using a whole wealth of energy that they actually need to learn how to hold themselves. It doesn't mean that they can do 100 million things really easily, but maybe energetically, psychically, and self-narrative wise, they get to start to appreciate themselves as an individual entity. It's all very subtle, but I think we don't talk about the psychology of this stuff enough. I really like the telepathy tapes for what they're doing in terms of bringing this kind of understanding to the fore. But I think there's a lot that we could unpack in terms of the relationships that are formed and the very necessary codependency that there is at times in families. It just is. You can't go, or we just can't be codependent. There is. But I think there's really interesting, subtle ways where you can bridge people being able to hold their own more without making them fall off the cliff so that it doesn't work. And so that subtle shift in self-orientation and connection can potentially be quite useful. So understanding yourself in a different way, taking measures to support your nervous system in ways that are viable for you and gentle enough so that you're not further compounding your stress by trying to be perfect, be mindful, be calm. All those things don't actually work when you're exhausted, is a start. So I'm hoping this is a useful start of a conversation, in a sense. And then I really like this quote. I love it. I love it because it's my work. This is how I talk about my work. It also reminds me of a Lao Tzu quote about the 10,000 things. There's 10,000 things, and none of them can be worked on by you. It's from one of my favorite poems. And there's too many things. And so our brains think we can hold it all. If we just hold it all and we just get it right, especially as mums, especially if parents of disability kind of families, then we're trying to fix everything all the time to keep ourselves safe, to keep them safe, to make sure everything's going to work. There's too many things in the air. And so, again, pulling back and sitting back and finding some grace and letting all of those things, trusting in those things. So act without attachment to the results, which will never be solely determined by you. There's something, in what I was just saying, where you have to disattach a little bit because you're actually trusting that the person can do this. And you're trusting that you've got them by trusting that they can do it. And that there's something more that's at play here, and there's room for growth. I read yesterday, I can't remember the language, there was something about each cell has like a little extra sac in it, or a little holding is this empty thing, and they don't know what it is. And each cell has this little empty extra space and they don't understand it. And I got so excited. Someone had pictured it, and it was almost like a little crocheted bees pocket or something. It was like an extra pocket in a cell. It was really cute. But for me, that's there's always something we don't know. There's always something more that we have to have trust in. There's always that bit of magic because our bodies are magic. Our capacity for change is magic, and there's that extra element. So the results will never solely be determined by you. Is there you got to trust there's something else, and that's for you, for the relationship, and for your child. And so, how do we love but not carry it all? We remember that we require this as well. We, you're a body, you're a human being, you're a sentient soul who needs nurture, needs love, needs kindness. It's not necessarily going to come in ways that are functional like that from the person you're supporting because they can't, and it doesn't mean they don't love you. But how do you find ways to support, in this case, your nervous system is a chicken, often it's an octopus for me. But how are there ways that you can have self care and support yourself and your individuation? Because as a mother, you're supposed to have times where they individuate from you, and so do you. And so there's a whole psychology of how that gets interrupted or elongated if you're a parent of a kid with disability. And then how do you have it? Is there a little pocket somewhere, like in the cell, in each cell, and like an imaginal cell, but it's in each cell? How can you make some space in your life for you? What does it look like? What does it feel like? Is it possible? So that you get to have this as well, because every human being deserves care.